direct real estate investors with his brother Kevin. They founded the company 5 years ago. Erik graduated from the Richard Ivey School of Business in 2006 and has used his education to provide the best investment opportunities for his vast and diverse clientele. Erik also founded Strategic Real Estate Investing, which is an education-based company that is designed to teach individuals everything they need to know about purchasing investment property. Erik has been featured in Canadian Real Estate and Wealth magazines. Please join me in welcoming Erik Mitchell to the stage.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to be here today and speak to every one of you. As I was introduced, my name is Erik Mitchell, and like I said, I want to give you a brief introduction as to what my businesses are so you can kind of get a context for what I'm going to be speaking to you about today. My brother and I did found DRE, Direct Real Estate Investors, 5 years ago, and what we do is create passive investment opportunities for people that are looking to diversify their portfolio outside of the traditional market-based avenues like stocks, bonds, mutual funds, things of that nature. So simply put, people give us money, we make them great returns on that money. Now, Strategic Real Estate Investing is an education-based company because what we found is not everybody's looking for passive investments. Some people want to have a little bit more hands-on and be more active for investors. So we have developed a course that's available online that teaches people to purchase income properties in the safest, most secure way possible. DRE right now currently owns 68 different rental units across Ontario, some of the best economies, and we're actually just starting up the SRE business, so that's getting going right now online. And before I dig into what I'm really here to talk to you about today, I want to touch on just Ivey and what my education was like. Because hindsight is always 20/20. So, looking back after 5 years after graduation, well, I guess almost 6 now, it's always important to share how I view that education, what I learned. Now, Ivey was actually the reason why I got my first job. I had worked for a year before I started these companies, and if it wasn't for Ivey, I don't know if I would have got the job or not. I actually met the CFO of that company in one of my classes. He came to talk that day, and I talked to him afterwards and continued that, and he ended up hiring me. My first day of work, he introduced me to the CEO of that company, and he was also an Ivey grad. And that's when I really started to realize the power of the Ivey alumni and how expansive it was and how many resources you could really start tapping into after graduation. And that's one side. And the other side is the skill set there. The things that you learn, the different way to approach problems, and that was really important in my first job. I was a continuous improvement coordinator, which is neither here nor there, but I saved the company over $1 million my first year, and the things I learned at Ivey really helped with that. But more importantly, it was instrumental in the growth and, more importantly, the development of my companies and corporations. Now, I am going to talk to you about my story and how I got to be here in front of you today, but what I want to talk about first is the mindset. I feel that having a proper mindset going forward and doing whatever it is that you want to do is imperative and definitely important. It's that solid foundation in which you are going to build whatever it is that you want in life. Now there's 5 key areas that I want to talk about. One being choices. We're faced with many of them every day. 2 is figuring out what it is that you really want. I know a couple of speakers already touched on that. The third is the I can't versus how can I mentality. Next is having a commitment to achieving those things that you really want in life. And lastly is failures and how to approach them and how to deal with them throughout your path to success. Now every day we're faced with hundreds of choices. Your alarm goes off at 8 o'clock in the morning. Are you going to decide to get up out of bed or maybe set that for the second class? Are you going to walk or take the bus to school? Who are you going to hang out with afterwards? They can be larger things like, are you going to fill out that application to go to the Richard Ivey School of Business? Just by filling out that application, you're not necessarily making the choice to go, but you can affect other choices like probably waking up for that first class or maybe studying a little bit longer the night before an exam instead of going out. By making that one choice, you're affecting other things in your life. And it's great because we control those choices, don't we? We choose what it is we're going to do. And at any point in time, we can look in a mirror, and all we will see is a direct reflection of our past choices and actions. Now, I want to focus on past here because by no means who you are now that has no effect on who you can become and what you can achieve. Understanding that what we are now and what we have achieved done in life is due to all of those choices. And if we essentially have complete control and we're responsible for all the choices that we make, and all those choices therefore shape our lives, then we ultimately have complete control over what lives we're going to lead. Now this can be a scary thing, this can be a great thing. It can be scary because you got to stop making excuses. You can't really blame anything on anybody else for what happens to you. And now I'm not saying that absolutely everything in your life you have control over. There are outside circumstances, things that do happen that you don't have control over. Somebody once told me that life is 10% of what happens and 90% of what you make. And that's really what it is. 10% is outside of that control, but you have the choice to make as to what to do afterwards. A good example is midnight, you got paper or a test or something due online and the power goes out. What choices are you going to make from there? Are you going to say, I'll go to my professor and ask for an extension because, hey, I had no control over that? Are you going to handwrite and go in at 8 o'clock and meet your professor and say, hey, it wasn't done online, but here it is? You're going to go up to the university, try to go to the library, all these different things. And you can take that one step further and say, well, why was I waiting until midnight to finish something online that's due at 8 o'clock in the morning anyway? It's kind of invigorating to understand that, once we take and have accountability and understand that we're responsible for all those choices and that we really have control over what those are, therefore we control our lives, it is a very empowering thing to understand and have that kind of mindset moving forward. Now, it's very difficult to know what choices are the right or wrong ones if you don't know what it is that you want. If you don't know where you're going, any road can take you there. Therefore, any of those choices can be the right ones you don't know. So that's why it's extremely important, and as the other two speakers have already talked about, you have to find out what it is that you really want in life. And when you're spending the time to think about this, make sure you don't have those outside factors, because you know what, you're going to have your parents telling you maybe what they may have wanted for themselves. And you have society in general kind of saying what you should do in life. Now, there is no right or wrong answer when you figure out what it is that you really want. If you want to go back home to your small town, which I'm also from, and marry your high school sweetheart and work at a call center for the rest of your life, and focus on your family, so be it. It doesn't matter. All that matters is that what you want. And that's what you really have to figure out. You have to have something that has an emotional connection, something that gets you excited, that makes you tick. Because if you don't have that, then you're not going to be able to pursue and have the commitment that I'm going to talk about later. You're not going to have these things that are necessary because it's not what you want, it's what somebody else wants for you. Now, also when you're thinking about that, on the other side of the spectrum, going home to a small town, you could have it where you want to buy or build a multi-million-dollar company and be financially free by the age of 35. Now, if you choose something like that that's outside of what the norms of society are, you're going to have people telling you how crazy you are. And I went through that. I had a good job. I had making decent money. And I came back home to my small town, started this real estate company. People say, what the heck are you doing? Why are you spending $20,000 a year on an education and then go ahead and become an entrepreneur? Why couldn't you do that anyway without the education? And if you decide and choose to do something like that that's outside of it, expect those people, that outside noise to be there, and you just have to block it out. You have to take it with a grain of salt and understand that that is not their choice. You are doing what you want to do, and don't worry about what anybody else thinks. The next thing I want to talk about is the I can't versus how can I mentality. Your mind's interesting because when you sit there and say to yourself that I can't do something, life's a self-fulfilling prophecy in that way. I can guarantee that if you say to yourself that you can't, you won't be able to. All these excuses will start coming into your mind and you will prove yourself right. You won't be able to do whatever it is you say that you can't do. And it really is, that's an easy way out. It's a cop-out in my opinion. Like, you don't actually have to do anything when you sit there and say, I can't. And it's rare for the easiest way to be the most rewarding way. Now, on the other side of the coin, if you take the how can I approach the things, it's amazing what happens and how your mind starts changing, how it works. There's scientific research to prove this, but when you pose a question like that to yourself, even though you're not thinking about it consciously, your subconscious starts trying to work and solve that problem. Now, I'm not saying that you can give yourself a problem like I'm going to start a $100,000 a month business, and all of a sudden you think about it, and eventually it's going to lay out in front of you, and that's how it is. But a great example of this is anybody Anybody have it where, or have a time when they were trying to think of somebody's name? You know, you can see their face, you know the person, and no matter what you do, you can think of it as hard as you want, 5, 10, 15 minutes, it doesn't matter, it's not going to come to you. Hour, day, week later, it comes to you, doesn't it? Because your subconscious mind continues to work until it finds a solution to that answer. And that's a great thing about and how powerful our minds are. Now, a perfect example for myself and in my business, we were about 8 months in, and we had an opportunity to purchase an 8-plex. Now, we didn't have any money for that. I come from a very low middle-class family, and we didn't have investors. We didn't have anybody we could go to. We've never even done commercial properties before. And we had every reason and every excuse to sit there and say why we couldn't move forward with that purchase. But we didn't allow ourselves to take that easy way out. We sat down and continued to think about it every day. We constantly had meetings and tried to figure out what it was that we could do. And it didn't come to us then either. I was actually out for dinner at a restaurant when just an idea came to me, a strategic way to structure it. And it wasn't like, okay, this is how I could purchase the 8-plex. But that answer opened a door, which then led to more obstacles, which more how can I approaches, which then eventually led to the purchase of the property. And that 8-plex took us 11 and a half months by the time it came across our desk at the time we purchased it. We went through a couple different mortgage brokers. We had to use 3 lawyers on the deal. It was very complex, but we had to continue to have the how can I mentality to work our way through that. And this is only one story, one example of how many times that we've done this. But having that kind of mentality has been instrumental in the growth of our companies. And if we didn't have it, we wouldn't have the successes that we've done today. Now, I mentioned earlier about how important it is to figure out what it is that you want in life. And the reason is because you need to have a commitment to whatever that is. And if it doesn't excite you, if it's not yours and you don't own it, then it's very difficult to have the level of commitment that is necessary in order to achieve those things in life. And once you've made that decision, I'm going to urge you to make sure that you do commit to it. You know, contrary to what most people believe or traditional thinking is that success is defined by a single action or choice. You know, I passed this exam, therefore I succeeded. Now I'm going to challenge that. I'm going to say that your success is much more tied to the commitment that you have to achieve that success. And when you have that level of commitment, I've heard this from many other people, many successful people, and I've experienced it myself, but when you have that level of commitment, success is really a foregone conclusion. All the who, what, when, where, whys, hows, it doesn't matter. You have to understand that when you have that unwavering commitment, like we like to call it, you know that you're going to stick on that path, and eventually at the end of that path, there is light. There's light at the end of the tunnel. That success is a foregone conclusion. Now, when I started to wrap my mind around this mentality, I looked back and started to analyze that and say, is that true in my own life? And looking back and honestly saying that everything that I have tried and I gave an honest 100% effort to achieve it, I have been able to succeed and move forward. I wanted to go to university. I achieved that. I wanted to play in the Western football team. I did that. I wanted to go to Ivy. I did that. I started looking back at everything that I actually did have a success in. I gave 100%. I never failed when I truly wanted something. And it was very empowering for me to understand, have that mentality and think about things in that way. Because when you have that commitment, trust me, success will be there for you. Now, part of that commitment as well is there's going to be a lot of tough times. There's going to be a lot of obstacles along your path. And the one thing that is going to keep you wanting to keep going down it is that commitment. It's the one thing, you're always going to think that the grass is green on the other side. If you become an entrepreneur, that 9 to 5, being able to go home after work and kind of shut your mind off is always going to look very enticing. But if you want it bad enough, then this is the one thing that's going to keep you down that path. Now, lastly, is failure. I don't know, a lot of people have talked about failure, and the way I view it is, as a society, we've kind of been conditioned to avoid failure. Failure has always been a bad thing in our lives. Anybody here fail a test? Okay. Did you want to take it home to your parents? Were you afraid? You know, you start looking back, and failure throughout my life anyway has always been a negative thing. It's always been a bad thing. And it's unfortunate, but we really have a society that fears failure. And the worst part is we don't even recognize that we fear that failure. We start making excuses and rationalizing as to why maybe we just don't want to do it, instead of understanding that we're really afraid to step into that unknown and take a chance and go ahead and try to achieve it, even though you don't have all the information or whatever it may be. Now, my brother and I, we use two acronyms for fear. You can either fear everything and run, or you face everything and reap. And in my opinion, that's what you have to do with failure. You have to take it head on. You have to reap the benefits of it, because there are lots. There's only one time, or one way, in our opinion, that failure it can be a negative thing. Is that if you don't learn from it, if you don't grow from it, you have that victim mentality that, you know what, it wasn't me, it was this, something outside of my control, or it was so-and-so that didn't do their job right. And almost everything, if you critically think about it hard enough, and are hard enough on yourself, you can sit there and say, well, you know what, maybe if I'd have followed up with that person, or pushed them a little bit harder, they wouldn't have made that mistake. You can bring it back to yourself almost every single time. And when you're able to do that, then you actually learn from those mistakes. Mistakes aren't a bad thing. Those failures are not bad things, because that's what helps you grow. That's what helps you expand as a person, become better in your job, have your business get better. Those are all good things. And if it wasn't for failure, you wouldn't have had that learning lesson. Now, once you think that you've been critical enough and you're confident in that, put it behind you. Don't dwell on it. Don't sit there and reflect and say, oh, and beat yourself up about it. You can't do that, because you have to understand that those are good things. You know, that is just a necessary stepping stone down the path to the inevitable success that you're going to achieve. Start embracing failure. Start being thankful for it, because it really is necessary in order to achieve your success. You know, Thomas Edison, when he tried to invent the light bulb, after hundreds of failed attempts, he was asked if he felt like a failure. And he responded with, why would I feel like a failure? I've not failed hundreds of times. I have not failed once. I have succeeded in proving hundreds of ways that will not work. And when I have exhausted the ways that will not work, I will find the way that will. Now, that kind of wraps up what I want to talk in regards to mindset. And now I'm going to touch on my story. And I want you to, as you can see, as I go through it, you'll start seeing the things and how important mindset was for me and how impactful it was in order for me to do what I ended up doing over the last 5 years. I was 20 years old, and I was getting into Ivy, and my brother approached me with this business that I'm in today. Now, you have to understand, my brother Kevin, he graduated from Windsor University. He majored in history, minored in English, and was a teacher. And here I am, probably a little bit cocky at the time, thinking, I'm going to business school, how are you going to tell me what I should be doing going into business? Very closed-minded, which, sorry for another day, but not the right approach to anything. And he kept on me, he kept talking to me, he went out and bought a couple properties during that time, read a bunch of books, and was always in my ear. He was always persistent, just kind of giving me those updates. I always was turning around and poking holes in the business plan and things like that. It was about the time of graduation that he came to me and he gave me a book. And he said, I want you to read this, and when you do, really start thinking about what it is that you want in life. And he said, well, what is your plan anyway? I said, well, a very traditional mindset at the time. I already got a job lined up. I'm going to go out and work for them. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to move up in the company and then eventually be a CEO of it and then retire, and life is good. And he said, so when you read this book, figure out what it is you really want. Not what you should do, not what anybody else wants for you, but what you really want. And that book changed my mindset. It wasn't like it was a complete shift, but it was kind of the spark that started the fire, so to speak. You know, it got me to have that same mentality till near the end. Instead of just running that company, I wanted to branch off and start my own then. You know, that's how it affected it. It wasn't a major shift, but it was a slight one. Now I'm going to suggest for everybody here to read that book, especially if you're looking and wanting to become an entrepreneur. And that's Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And now, I'm going to throw a little disclaimer in there. I've heard the Rich Dad Poor Dad puts on seminars and things like that. And this is, I'm not talking about that. I've heard some interesting things. So I'm talking about the book only. And that really was the starting point for me to start shifting my mindset. Now, throughout the year, I worked at this job, I saved up a bunch of money, and it bothered me that I saved somebody else $1.2 million, and I didn't get an extra cent for it. It didn't matter if I worked 60 hours a week or 40, I was paid the exact same amount. But all in all, I was pretty happy. But looking back, I wasn't truly happy, I wasn't fulfilled. And I knew, and it kind of bothered me that there was something missing at that point in time. My brother called me up later, about 10 months into work, and he said, hey, there's a real estate and wealth expo in Toronto, let's go. I said, okay. Hopped on, took me down, he bought tickets, we're sitting there, and it was a phenomenal weekend. It was an eye-opening experience for me. And one of the biggest speakers there was Tony Robbins. He was a keynote speaker. He was in the Grand Hall. And there was over 10,000 people that attended that event. And he had everybody up on their feet. He had everybody excited, like doing some crazy stuff. It was invigorating. But his main message that day was that we were meant for great things. The way he put it, we were born into greatness and conditioned into mediocrity. And that really hit home for me because I didn't feel like I was being great in what I was doing. Now, there was a lot of other great speakers that day, or that whole weekend, I should say, and they were all successful in their own rights. From all different kinds of industries and businesses, stock market, real estate, this, that, and the other thing. And all of their messages, it was surprising, but they all had one consistent message. And that was to go out and actually do it, to take action, to step into that unknown and with a shoot, ready, aim mentality. Doesn't matter if you have everything figured out in your mind. If that's what you really want, just go ahead and do it. Now, nearing the end of the weekend, it was interesting because they had different speakers in different rooms. So you had to choose what you want, kind of like the workshops here today. And it said, Bill Bartman, billionaire. And I was like, oh, an opportunity to see a billionaire, I'm in. So we went to that room. It was surprising. There were only about 50 people. I thought there'd be more, for somebody of that stature, a billionaire to be talking. I thought there'd be more people, but there wasn't. It was interesting, his story. This man was a millionaire 3 times, bankrupt twice, and a billionaire once. So he went from whatever coming out of university, he was millionaire, bankrupt again, millionaire, billionaire. So you can imagine some of the people that he met in his life. And he stood in front of us, 50 people in the crowd, and said, I have failed more times than anybody else that I have ever met. And to me, that struck a chord. That was huge to me. A billionaire telling me that he had failed more times than anybody else that he has ever known in his life. And that really got me thinking, what am I doing? Why am I afraid even to get out of what I'm doing now and start my own business, even in that industry? Why am I not taking that step? Is it because I have a fear of failure? Am I not wanting to just fail? And that's when I really started questioning a lot of things. After the weekend was done, we went down to Eastside Mario's. My mind going like crazy, beer in hand, tried to calm me down a little bit. Legs shaking about as fast as my mind was going. And it was interesting because all these things were kind of coming together for me all at one time. And I was nervous and kind of freaking out a little bit, but it was cool having the fog kind of lift out of my mind and understand and start to see things for what they really were. And my brother looks at me, he said, what are you thinking? And I said, I don't know, what are you thinking? He's like, well, we're both on the same page. A week later, I left my position, he left his teaching job, we went out, we got paid tens of thousands of dollars to get educated on real estate because you don't know what you don't know. So I knew about business. I knew nothing about real estate, so we paid to understand what we didn't know. And from there, we started failing. Failure after failure after failure after failure. And we were excited about it. We took every one of those failures with open arms, and we sat there and said, it is going to help us refine our systems and our procedures and our business in general. And if we wouldn't have failed, we wouldn't have grown to what it is today. And we were thankful for that. And it's kind of cool. Well, now, 5 years in, we still fail, but it's a heck of a lot less often. You'll find that. And, going through all that and kind of coming out the other side and achieving successes, it's, you know, I can now see what they were talking about and why they said the things that they said that weekend. Now, if I can leave you with one thing today, that is to understand and figure out what it is that you really want, and then make a commitment to achieving that in your life. And if you do, success is it's a foregone conclusion. It's not a matter of if, but a matter of when. Thank you. Fear everything and run, or face everything and reap.
You mentioned you played football. I understand that a lot of students who do varsity sports are competitive by nature. You think yourself as being competitive, and that's one of the reasons why you were just so focused and so determined to be successful or reach your mindset, I guess, as others have.
You're right. Athletes are competitive by nature. I am definitely a very competitive person. But do I attribute the competitiveness to my boldness? No. Life at the end is full of choices. And I've chosen so many other things, and instead I chose this. And competitive or not, athlete or not, it's still a matter of choice as to whether you want that or not.
So you really drove it home with the find what you want to do. Have you ever decided you wanted something in your past, decided you wanted something, found out that that's not the thing for you, and then moved on? Would you suggest that if we're unsure of exactly what we want, that we try that, maybe pick something, give it a try, and fail, move on?
Yeah, definitely. If you feel confident that you've given something enough thought, it's not just kind of the treat of the week, so to speak, from McDonald's. If you find that, you know, this is something that you have passion for it and has been lasting, you know, by all means, and yeah. And if you feel like you change, everybody changes.